Okay. Hello, everyone. Right now, the weather is 3 degrees, and in the forecast, it said it feels like -1. So, I wanted to give a talk though. And I thought about, because it's cold, I may explain something I do, there's a sort of skill I feel as a human being on this planet I have cultivated, or it was in my karma to activate or realize. And contextually, I think this episode would have a value for anybody interested in the mystery of communication and the dimensions and the voluntary and involuntary dimensions of communication. When I look around me, out of all the people that I know, and it could be that I don't know a lot of people, but out of all the people I know, I consider myself to be the most acquainted with noticing inner rhythms and vocalizing them. So there is different ways of that communication happens. I feel I have been privileged in this lifetime to have a sort of karma where in my inner realms there has been, let's say, unknown moving variables to it. So I'm pretty much going to speak about what I think is going on for all those people who feel they're talking to interdimensional beings, to anybody who has access to, let's say, auditory and inner experience. Pretty much I'm going to explain my experience of automated speech, like that's the intent. And think of it this way, or let me start it this way. That one has to have an ability when it comes to mystical insight to be able to watch the self. This is the most important thing. Imagine you're somebody who's watching your pet, or if you're a child, if you're a parent, you're watching your children. But what I'm trying to share with the viewers is that we human beings have this mind, and we're living at a time in human history where we don't really comprehend the mind. It's as if in front of our eyes we are living inside a story accepted too soon, when there are still mysteries to human intelligence. So anyways, to paint the context, hopefully in this episode I'll be able to explain how speech automates, what's its relationship with the inner realms, and what do you do once you do notice rhythm. And what do I even mean by rhythms in the inner realms? What do I mean that the mind can access a rhythm? Ultimately, one has to, this is the hilarious thing about mysticism, and considering, I feel this may be universally common, other human beings are having similar experiences, but what I think goes on is that the human being is conditioned in civility, right? We are like these creatures, these animals that were in the jungle, and through an incredible long time and gradual development, we stepped out of the jungle and we started behaving differently than our nature. The whole argument of nurture and nature comes here, right? Human beings can be said to be that species in nature, born from nature, but not behaving completely naturally. It starts with experiences, you know. I can say that exactly around 2011, 2012, I had the worst new year of my life. You know, I remember I even declared it at the time. Not because anything was happening. 2011 to 2012 was a year of my life where I would say I felt I was numb. I felt I was in limbo. I felt I was in some sort of strange karmic purgatory. I did not have any metaphysical, I wasn't drawn by the mysteries of the metaphysical. I was more drawn by my intense desires for the physical. Anyway, something happens. A series of things happen. But something causes me to start going to being a bit preferenceless and start wondering about my intelligence. You know, specifically this experience, which I've told the viewers on many occasions in different episodes. Pretty much I was sitting on a rock on this river, and then I realized I have no idea who I am, and every question I have, I could notice my mind. I could notice how my mind would project a question and my mind would answer it, and I would observe it as if, you know, the viewer of our intelligence, the viewer of our own intelligence that we are, stands capable of being aware of what happens to our intelligence. Series of experiences happen, you know, aside from Jungian synchronicities. But I remember afterwards I was raking leaves. I became incredibly preferenceless to my own life. So imagine somebody feeling they are karmically exiled from their outer realms, and then the person reaching a point having no preference, and then from that preferencelessness being able to notice different things about one's own mind. So the first thing I want to say about how I accessed automated speech was that I wasn't looking for it. I did not have a spiritual perspective. I had more just a wonder for what I am, you know? Long story short, I started these Mr.Within talks in 2014. Before 2014, from 2011 to up to 2014, I had pretty much mastered automatic writing, and I had mastered to some degree automatic speech. And what do I mean by automatic speech? You know, what do I mean by these? Pretty much I found myself having an ability to wake up in the mornings, early in the mornings, and this is before 2014 where I started the Mr.Within talks. I would wake up early in the morning, and what I would do is I had a laptop I would put the laptop on a chair. I had 2 chairs placed in my room. And I remember I would just, in the morning when I would get up from bed, I was still sleepy, and I would sit on a chair. In front of me there was another chair, and there was a laptop, and I had the video recording open for the laptop. And I would pretty much start speaking, and I would cultivate the inner experience. And so what it was like is, like, imagine somebody sitting on a chair. In front of them there's a laptop that's open, and all I had to do was to just notice I'm being there and just trust the moment, and the words would just flow out of my mouth. The same thing would happen when I would pick up a pen and I would write down. Suddenly I would get this emotion. My eyes would close, and it was as if some event was going on in my mind that inspired the movement of my hand. When I was younger, I had a difficulty of explaining this, but now throughout the years I've kind of built the structures of explaining it. And back then I didn't have a concept of inner realms and outer realms, but now, after finding those concepts, speaking about them the way I do in these talks, pretty much there was something going on in my inner realms. And it's another way of saying that a series of realizations turns one state of mind into, in some sense, an antenna that once it notices a rhythm and it trusts it, it expresses. So, okay, excuse me. So, I'm trying to give words to an experience. It's an experience that has turned into an emotional memory for me. Pretty much, I can, when it comes to a lot of things, when it comes to, let's say, giving talks, when it comes to writing, when it comes to drawing, I have found an involuntary trust in my moment where I can be there and I can notice the content of the mind move. Something about energy. What do I mean by, what's the point of saying that in the mind there are rhythms? You see, if let's say somebody wants to explain skydiving, okay? It's as if the person takes an effort. It's like, I gotta put in the effort to be like, okay, there's someone on an airplane, somebody jumps from an airplane, they're in the sky, there's a moment of free fall. And that's like skydiving. right? It takes an effort, it takes like a conscious effort to say something about the experience of skydiving. But the way when I go into these flow states, the way it's shifting from that, it's as if I have to push think of like communication in the moment being like a wagon, and if I have to push the wagon, the communication will take a lot of energy. But if I realize the wagon is being pulled, think of it this way, like you've gone into a nightclub. Before you enter the room, there's music playing, there's a rhythm to the moment before you notice the rhythm, right? So similarly, when it comes to our mind, it's this ability. This is why I say preferenceless is key. Why? Because the person has to know what is moving the moment. Is it an ego that wants to create something, or is it an awareness that has noticed there's movement beforehand? Think of it like a chess game. In a chess game, one side of the pieces is waiting for the other side to make the first move. When I give these talks, when I go into those flow states, I am actually doing nothing and trying to watch how my mind moves in accordance to the initial vision. So excuse me. I was just thinking, in what metaphor can I use to give the viewers, a perfect example of how I am experiencing my inner realms and how there's a rhythm in our minds. Okay? When we look at the biological body, it's rhythmic. Nobody can deny that. From our inhalation to our exhalation to the heart beating to our eyes opening and closing, there's a rhythm. The biological body has rhythms. Even when it comes to sleep and habit. But when it comes to the mind, an example, I'll give you two examples. One example to be aware of, which was the idea of the nightclub. Okay, so a person goes into a nightclub, there's music playing before they enter the room. And sometimes when it comes to creativity, it's not about just seeing something new, it's about a new rhythm. Energy is moving in a new way to itself. Right, so it can't familiarize with the past, so it has to create novelty, and discovery is made in the mind. Another example, I think this second one, what I'm going to say, is going to be the perfect example for this inner flow or automated speech rhythm thing I'm trying to say. So I want to tell the viewers, imagine we were in a universe where it's like a bunch of fish, okay? A bunch of fish under the ocean. These fish under the ocean are secular, they don't believe that there's like a higher power moving the ocean. They don't believe that, there's anything beyond the ocean. These fish are just in the water, and they're just, they're like, okay, this is it. This is the reality we have. Now, let's say there's a group of 5 fish, okay, a school of 5 fish. Now, imagine one of these fish goes off from the other fish, and it suddenly notices that there's a current in the ocean, and this fish all the fish are trying to get somewhere, but one of the fish takes a different route, finds a current. The current takes that fish to the other side of the ocean, and all the other fish that get to the other side, they're like, how did you get here so fast? Is this some a miracle technology? What is it? Right? And all that fish can do, who had been moved by the current and the rhythm, and say that there is something more in the moment. There is something moving in the moment. The moment is moving. The way I have experienced inner speech, and pretty much my experience of the inner realms, is that I have pretty much noticed what is moving before I move it. And because I can notice that, then it becomes very easy to just trust the rhythm of something moving, right? Imagine it's like, what would be a good example? What I'm trying to say is that going into this automated speech state requires a moment of trust when you internally observe the unknown. As the eyes close, a sort of sight is accessed. Think of consciousness as an intelligence that orients itself to what it considers to be real. Anything that is real, it engages. Anything that is unreal is in some sense contentless disengagement. What can be said? There's many ways that human attention can move. Really, the human intelligence, anything it trusts, it allows its intelligence to engage. So in order to access different ways of how the human intelligence is coming across, we divide it between that which is voluntary and that which is involuntary. Right now, for the human consciousness, You know, it's like the biological body requires some level of mobility to know that it's in control. That means we're like this intelligence that wants to know that it exists and is here. So because by being capable of moving existence, we, in some sense, the identity is preserved in the moment. Because our consciousness can move our body, we know that we are the body. Now, consciousness does not just have the power to move the body. Consciousness is, in some sense, a power or a spotlight where there is intelligent activity occurring within it. You know, so it's another way of saying the person first thinks that, you know what it is? It's kind of like the brain is expresses and receives. And so we think that only by expressing ourselves, we in some sense receive, but consciousness is like this advanced technology and the human knowledge from the beginning of its life to whatever age that it is alive in the outer realms. It's like what I'm trying to say is that our own knowledge on ourself, considering that then human intelligence is like an advanced technology, consciousness is not the most advanced way that intelligence can happen. If somebody was to say, Mr. Within, what is the most advanced state that human beings can, let's say the species can function? In reality, it is prior to ideology and time. You see, it's all about the nature of trust, and that's why free will is here. We look at a person, and if we say a person, you know, or how would I say, when it comes to the idea of trust, there's something important to notice, that there has always been an instantaneous involuntary trust of consciousness and how it's being. Even though in this moment, like right now, my free will can move around my biological body, like I can raise my hand in the air, I can walk, I can speak, but there's so many processes of the body that we don't think about, and they happen, and we trust instantaneously that they are of value for our being. So it's like, just like somebody who doesn't have to think about their heart just beats. It could be that the most advanced state for intelligence is something similar, where we realize to be a human being is an instantaneously involuntary trust in the moment, rather than a sort of voluntary analytical decision of the free will. You see, what the human mind is that it is actually a position. Our bodies were born and they exist, but when it comes to our minds, I think most people have this experience where it's as if at some point you just woke up into consciousness. As if when the child begins to remember, when there is a self that memories can file in accordance to. What I'm trying to say is that speech, communication, and pretty much anything through an experiential realization that there are unknown rhythms behind the way the content, the known content of our mind moves. Many processes of our biology that are in the control of consciousness can be shifted, and in some sense the unconscious can move it. So it's like a known individual mover or an unknown collective mover. Trust is a sort of release. You know, there's this idea that the human beings are attached in samsara, or the creature reincarnates because it has a desire for something in reality other than what reality is, you know. I remember getting acquainted with Vedic thought, and in Vedanta they have the idea of these 7 upper worlds and 7 lower worlds, and Earth is at the bottom of this mountain called Mount Meru. And so there's 7 upper worlds, 7 lokas. In Vedic thought, Vedic mythology, the highest loka, the highest heaven, is called Brahma Loka, and Brahma Loka is the abode where God lives, where truth lives alone. And so it's that state where the being, or poetically the Atman, the soul that gets to the 7th state, stops reincarnating. And there's a sort of mystical poetry here. Why? Because the 7th state is considered as the original state. So imagine there is 7 parallel universes of Earth. One of them is the original Earth. And the other 6 are like staircases. They're the stairway to the 7th. Now it seems to me that if we follow this line of thought in accordance to a mystical context, that if the individual reaches Brahma Loka, the 7th heaven, they don't reincarnate because they are in the original state. They are in the original reality, which is in some sense, if God created the world, where God is the creation of the world. So the idea is that we start off with the psychology that is attaching a part of itself to a part of the world. And due to its attachment, endlessly reincarnates. We attach ourselves to reality because we fear reality. We fear reality because at some core position, not in the memory of this individual lifetime, but in every person's universal memory, they distrusted their own being. You know, in some schools of thought, Earth is seen as a sort of training school for delinquents of cosmic awareness. Like some people have this view, right? As if we made a mistake, not just an Abrahamic one. Sorry, guys. So it was as if some sort of initial distrust in the original state of being has caused man to be forced into a cycle to find the original state of being. But as long as we desire something, we don't have it. See, that's the nature. So many people wonder about how to change their karma. And the biggest thing is to shift your mindset from what you want to what you have. Anybody who does this accesses a different earth. To be grateful of reality, that is the preferencelessness I'm talking about. You know, imagine whoever you are, regardless of what sort of story of past, whether justice or unjust, whatever sort of story of past you've lived, just for a moment, try to find within yourself in the present an ability to be just grateful for being present. This is something where I would say the wrath of loneliness, if loneliness was, I shouldn't say loneliness, but if a sort of isolation of truth was a sort of dragon, you know, it's like the way I've combated this dragon is just this realization that any time life changes, one will consider what is it that has changed. To be grateful of the content of your mind then to be grateful of your mind, then to be grateful for how intelligence is present regardless of the change of content. Imagine someone being grateful for celebrating a birthday, and then someone being grateful to be able to be conscious and notice how their life has changed so far, you see? What I'm trying to tell the viewers is that the mind is an advanced technology. There's mysteries that surround it. The resolution to one of these mysteries of how it's happening, it's in some sense a return to the original Earth. So what it is that there's initially a fear, and there's two types of fear. There is fear of yourself, and there's fear of that which is external to you. Okay? Spiritual, let's say, errors, or let's say a soul being thrown into a cycle of reincarnation is due usually to a being that is not grateful for their self. So some beings have come on this earth to, in some sense, learn that they have to be grateful to how their self is being the origin of their being. But some beings have already completed this. Some beings already have perfected their love of self, right? And when I say love of self, I'm not talking about this individual biological existence. Do you know? I am talking about how your attention, see, there's different memories. And I guess I'm speaking to a mystical context here, so keep that in mind. So there is an individual self, which is the moment you were born to the moment you die, like a physical individual self. That physical individual life, think of it this way, our individual life is a human being on earth. Our collective life is not a self in a world, it's an awareness to a world. So it's another way of saying, it's like saying before you were a human being, a humanized attention to the world, you were an attention in the universe. So there's an individual memory and there's a universal memory. The universal memory usually opens up for beings who have an ability to acknowledge it. It's kind of like, think of it this way, when the student is ready, the master appears. So when the person is capable of acknowledging a reality, that reality tends to happen. Anyways, where am I going with this? By suggesting there's a universal memory. The idea is that, think of it, there's three dimensions to the being. One dimension, your individual physical life. One dimension, your non-physical collective life. So imagine you are an intelligence right now, wherever you are listening to me. A part of your intelligence is in your consciousness, which is based on your birth on this planet till, let's say, the time you transition or you complete your, the tasks of your energetic being. The second sort of dimension, what I'm trying to say is like the attention originated from the beginning of the moment the person was born physically to the moment they pass away, but there's also an origin to our intelligence, and this one is very bizarre. This is not really something for me to talk about in this talk. Why? Because it requires a complete different opening up of the context that I've spoken about so far. But pretty much there's a way our attention was being space before anything was in space. Those people who remember that, they actually have an awareness beyond a universal entity. So right now, my individual biological, think of it this way, right now me speaking to you and anybody we see physically, biologically, that human being is like the tip of the iceberg of the mystery of how their mind is interdimensionally a bigger space. So think of it this way, just like an onion has concentric spheres. Right now, me speaking, this is in one concentric sphere. There's another concentric sphere around this. It's as if not the memory of the lifetime, but the memory of the life force. And the memory of the life force is not limited to time. Time becomes the leaves on the branch of the life force. You know. Right now, our species is still dealing with one biological, one outer physical life, and for now, one inner non-physical life. But in reality, our non-physical life is limitless. That means behind our eyes, the true essence of the mind is a universal being. But in front of our eyes, the true essence of the body is an individual local being. But beyond this, that means I'm someone saying you don't only have an individual memory, you have a universal memory, your individual memory being from the start of when you were physically born, right? And your universal memory being the start of when the universe came into existence, when matter entered space. But you also have a sense of self that has never moved. Okay. So this is really the awareness that it is already in Brahma Loka. And the angle of speech can be shifted. So anyways, the intention, the purpose, and how the attention moves. Right now, as I'm speaking, my eyes are closed. I'm not putting any effort. It's just the vision is there. The mind, it's as if my mind is moving before my body vocalizes the concepts. Right, that's what I'm trying to tell people. Right, we don't think about our breathing. It automatically happens, and we trust the process. When it comes to speech, when it comes to any sort of movement, we can tap into this. The New Age community taps into this and feels that extraterrestrials are being channeled, or they're channeling interdimensional entities. That's the ego's way. That's been, in some sense, the last stance of the ego. Think of it this way, that the biological body has a backup system. Right, when the body is feels pain, it recoordinates, it readjusts its behavior. Now, the mind is not something that could feel pain and pleasure. Okay, but the mind is something that, instead of pain and pleasure inspiring it, it's the known and the unknown that inspires it. So think of it this way, your body, the senses are governed in accordance to pain, pleasure due to the evolutionary animal, but when it comes to the mind, it's based on the known and the unknown, and the capability of the mind to imagine the unknown. I thought about it that let's say somebody is afraid of spiders, okay, and it's as if, why is the person afraid of spiders, right? And imagine the person's in the yard, they suddenly see a spider on the leaf, and the person is freaking out, screaming, running away, dodging the leaf like a ninja, do you know what I mean? And the idea is, why is the person afraid? Right, afraid. And I realize people are not afraid of what is in front of them. They are afraid of what can happen based on what is in front of them. You know, when I was younger, I'll tell you this. I think shyness is the sign of an incredibly imaginative mind. Let me tell you why. It's as if how far we can see into the future of something, right? Imagine somebody is walking by the side of the street, you know, they look to the side and they see the sign has fallen onto the street. This is actually a memory of mine when I was in UK, Birmingham. One morning, early morning, I was walking to the ATM to grab money, and as I was walking, this wooden sign from this construction place had fallen onto the street. And it was that moment where I was the only one on that street walking early in the morning, right? And I remember I just saw in my mind, okay, the sign is not destroyed, a car hasn't come yet, it's like, and for a second, my mind saw the future of it, and I just ran and pulled the sign to the sidewalk from the street, you know. And it was as if my mind was engaged with the future of the incident. So imagine somebody who is shy in their mind, and what they're seeing in front of their eyes, they have tapped into the future probabilities, and they are reacting to how their mind is forecasting the future of the moment, you know. Experiential wisdom is trust. Intellectual wisdom is knowledge. Ultimately, we human beings, why do we seek knowledge? To have trust and certainty in our moments. To be a human mind is to be this instrument in the world, in the history of the world. It's like not only can you see the world, but your mind can internally engage it conceptually. This whole time we think we've been just living a physical life, not realizing how many ways our mind has seen the moment and lived ahead of it. Fear is a sign of a mind that has noticed something ahead. An important question that must be asked when it comes to metaphysical practice. What level of dehumanized observance, cultivation is it required to be able to communicate through an automated state? It all depends on who you are and how seriously you take yourself. Even though people seek spiritual truth to attain some sort of ultimatum of certainty, in reality, one realizes, how would I say it? When you realize the world is bigger than yourself, yourself becomes a student of all worlds, whether inner or outer. When I look back at my youth, some of the most defining moments of my life were moments where I was embarrassed. Something embarrassing happened. And in those moments, I remember just being a quiet kid in my nature. I would render myself silent. So it depends on who you are, really. I am a person who, in the outer realms, circumstances have happened that have made me feel my self-worth equals to zero. And in my inner realms, things have happened that have made me feel like zero. And when you do feel worthless and you feel like nothing, it's strangely a freedom. This might be one of the most bizarre types of freedom, but when there is nothing to lose, only victory remains. Anyways, we are who we are, and the moment goes forth, and many human beings will enter this world, and they will have journeys similar to ours. The beautiful thing about life that is one person may think alone, but they don't know how many people on the planet are looking that way. Anyways, all of this is going for me to say that, like a being in Brahmaloka, the highest heaven in Vedic thought, is a being that is being so original that it cannot experience an artificial consequence. Because we feared the world, we became it. But there's a fear, or I should say there's a joy beyond the fear of the world. The intellect is very useful, best used like a technology which can be turned into a sword and shield. The intellect can be seen as an Iron Man suit even, but the intellect is not the furthest, is not where the most amazing movements of the mind happen. You see, the intelligence of the being that we are is positioned in two types, as if there's two modes in any moment for any human being. One moment is they can choose to be the observer, noticing the observed, or they can choose to be the observed. When, for example, somebody running, let's say there's a running race, and there's a runner, and there's somebody, an audience member, who's watching that runner, right? The audience member is observing movement. They are not participating in the act. They are an observer. Right now, for example, the people listening to me give this talk, you are like an observer of the moment, and I'm in the driver's seat of the observed. I'm the one who's like moving the moment, right, giving the talk, right? So what I'm trying to say is, like, there's a state where the intelligence of the moment is being defined by being an observer of the moment, and then there's a state where you are the observed and you are the movement. It's like somebody who suddenly runs, and then stops and sits down on the ground, and it's like their inner realms is still running, right? So to mysticism is how you're realizing that you are an unknown observer of the world. But physical life is about realizing, no, you are the vehicle you're driving. Really what it is that the inner realms, the reason I call it realms is because it gives you a world. Whether you're a dancer, whether you're a singer, whether you're a writer, whatever, you're even a chef, or you're somebody even, like, imagine like a chef cutting vegetables. It doesn't matter anything a person does, even washing dishes, right? Anything you do, right? There is, how would I say it? There is a rhythm to every moment, and one can rhythmically complete and live a lot of life. It doesn't mean it's conscious. It's kind of like human intelligence. When we wake up, we start in consciousness, and in consciousness, free will feels like the one moving everything. But if we were semi-conscious, a lot of the ways the knowing of the moment expresses would be instant. I don't know how to say it. Like, I don't know, people maybe can try this, right? Like, something I would do, I had been inspired by Salvador Dali. I wrote this book, which was all like spoken. It was kind of like automated speech, called Cationic Imprints, okay? And how I recorded this book was I got inspired by Salvador Dali, and Salvador Dali was this next level surrealist artist where he would pretty much wear his pajamas, sit at the side of his bed, put a metal spoon on his knee, and put a bucket right beside his knee. And any time where he was about to fall asleep, like, he would draw in a semi-sleep state, right? All his paintings he would draw in a semi-sleep state, as if, and anytime he fell too asleep, the spoon would fall in the bucket and he would wake up. So I tried something like this for myself, but not the way Salvador Dali did it. I remember I would go into my bed, I would just, lights are off, everything, I'm in the bed, and I've lied down, and only my right forearm is like vertical, like pointing. I would hold my phone in my right hand, and I would sleep, and the whole time I would try to keep myself awake by having the phone held in my hand vertically, right? As I'm lying horizontally on the bed. So I remember I would go into this state where there would just be a feeling. It was like more like give it like maybe a couple seconds after the body has trusted that the moment is going to be still. And as if closing my eyes, being in front of this black screen, and suddenly in this black screen experience is taking place. You know, I am telling you, whoever you are listening to me, we can walk behind our eyes, we can fly behind our eyes, we can do things behind our eyes that we can't do in front of our eyes, but the experiential value is different. So the cultivation of trust in moments both known and unknown, this is the key. Most people have trust in known moments. Most people trust, they trust what they can see, touch, and expect, right? If somebody knows, like, can expect somebody's behavior, then they can trust that person, right? But if you can't expect somebody's behavior, you don't know to what extent you can trust them, you know? You know, I'll tell people something about my karma, my presence. Even though now I don't identify as a self that has karma. Why? Because the self is just my attention. But something that karmically I've noticed is that since my youth I've had a passive nature, and I don't resist moments. A lot of people's personalities are shaped in accordance to what they resist, right? But if you're a passive person and you don't resist something, what ends up happening is that you're like being a being that is trusting the simplicity of every moment, right? And when people trust, how would I tell you, when you don't resist something, and I don't know how to say it, but it's like this idea that people who don't fight back, we feel more justified to push. Something in the brain of the human being has not, some part of the human intelligence has not realized that anything it cannot confront within itself, it projects outwards. The species is waking up from the linguistic enchantment of self-obsession. So, what are some jewels that can be found in the dirt of a simple moment? What can I share for the viewers? That if anybody has a question on automated speech, feel free to ask. That's why this episode is here. But I guess I'll say this. There's something related to emotions. Trust is emotional to some degree. And it's honestly how a person feels. So in pretty much all these talks I've given, everything I've written down, even the artworks I've drawn, there has literally been like first equipping myself with the setting, and then after I'm acquainted with the setting, it's like, imagine you take a pen in your hand and you have a feeling in the moment, and this feeling makes you for a second forget that there's a pen in your hand, forget that you're there in the moment, and it's like you're watching a film behind your eyes, imagine. And this film is so real that it gives you an emotion, and the person instantly knows what to do. You see, it's like before, like the email inbox was made, just like a person can get an email. Believe it or not, our minds are acting like an inventory. Thoughts are like our notifications throughout the day. So really what it is like, I wake up and I notice the information, like reality. The good thing about reality is that you don't have to imagine it, it's just there. Reality is like free imagination. You just wake up and you're like, oh, nice, I don't have to imagine a world, I'm in one, right? So reality is like instantaneous imagination. That you don't have to imagine, it's there, it's free imagination. Based on what I notice in my inner realms, it's kind of like the brain is picking up resources from the environment and then building these resources internally. So it's kind of like we're a biological camera, and this camera, the brain is like a camera where the camera records the content and edits the content and somehow can look through the content, right? We don't just have thoughts, we can look through our thoughts. That's the whole point of logic, that's the whole point of analysis, right? We analyze reality. Why? Because we notice multiple variables and we notice the changing context. What I'm trying to tell people is that it's a freedom, and to do anything requires freedom. The freedom must be internal, and it's in some sense hilarious because it's like confidence, it's like trusting who you are behind your eyes before you are in front of it, before you express in front of it. And if somebody has not been trained in life to feel like a fool, they will be attached to the content of their mind. To be an intelligent being is like to never be convinced, and therefore having an infinite reason to explore. I know and have felt the unknown from the beginning of my life. I feel that deep down, and this is why I would say playfulness is the destiny of the intellect. Why? Because it's more than the information we can be certain about. What is certainty in a changing world? Are we just living in a theater of human beings acting? Is the species acting like it knows what it's going on, or does it actually know what it's going on, right? And this responsibility is intensified the more we become collectively intelligent. Back in the day, reality and, let's say, culture, which stems from the behavior of individuals, it was more around focused around hunger, right? It was as if the organs that we were prioritizing in life were like our stomachs, right? But when we managed to solve the physiological problems of survival, then the organ we began becoming centered and focused around was the mind, was the brain, right? So civilization was orbiting around the stomach, and now it's orbiting around our brains. And why are we so fascinated by the human brain? Because the human brain receives the world, converts sensory solar light into a character in a subjective story, a subjective character in a story. Just to realize how things are happening at the moment. Like, people don't realize there's a way a person looks at spirituality as if something is missing in their life. And there's a way you find spirituality when you're looking at how full life is. You know, it's like the mind's asking itself. I've had an ability to envision, let's say, the absence of abundance. Why can't the mind envision, the presence of abundance? There was a time where I felt like, who am I to talk about civilization? But then I noticed we are not advancing it. It's usually a vision of a space where the person trusts. It's the extent. Think of it this way: there's a ratio to one's knowledge based on the amount of vision they trust. It's an instant. Trust is an instantaneous thing. And if knowledge is there to assist our ability in trusting the moment, then instantaneous knowledge leads to trust. It's like, a person doubting their own voice and realizing the species has evolved for 4.5 billion years. Writing was invented like 5,000 years ago, and even earlier than that, human beings began speaking. As if, when I think about what should the human being be doing in the cosmos, it's as if it is in some sense using the technologies that its evolution has accessed. I feel it's a phase. I feel that there will come a potential for a silent humanity. Even beyond that, there will come a potential for a shape-shifting humanity. And then there will come a phase where it's like an instantaneous humanity. Right now, the value of our individual bodies is the minds that are moving through it. If Rene Descartes' interdimensional pointer of the mind-body dualism is valid, that means the mind is a separate dimension than the biological body. Then, at some point, if we completely choose to experience ourselves as a collective presence of mind, the need for our individual bodies become obsolete. So what I'm trying to say is that it's a rare privilege to be a biological human being that can communicate and speak and is alive at a point in history where we still don't know who we are. Like, kids all around the planet are trying to solve the Rubik's Cube. It's like, why don't we solve the mystery of consciousness? Why don't we solve the mystical problem of reality? How the problem and solutions are even contextually necessary. You trust in visions, and there's ways that the mind can interact with the forces of intelligence, that the more experiential they are dehumanized, and the more existential they are humanized. So what I mean by this is that right now my body feels like it's in the hand of my whole moment, and my whole moment is moving it, and before even I start to speak, there's an instantaneous innate trust in how the moment is being. That's it. Emotions are kind of simplifying, smaller processes of our biological existence, and it's based on a person's mystical thirst. Some people are not thirsty. That means they look at life and they're like, it doesn't have to be more than what I see. What I see is enough, you know. For most people, what's the concept called? Comfort zone. What is the comfort zone? The familiarity of how we're living leads to emotions that are being considered more bearable. That means, is it more bearable to be happy in a fixed way? Imagine there's a loop of happiness, but then there's like a straight line up, like I'm saying it's like, do we want to be in a loop of happiness, or do we want to be on an endless journey of different states of being in mind? What can I say? In front of our eyes, free will is being its own opportunity in empty space. Behind our eyes, it's not a humanized position, dear viewers. This is something the species has to, many philosophers have to come and try to help the species not to get frightened about this, you know. In front of our eyes, we are a living creature. Behind our eyes, we seem to be the space that is allowing and using this creature. We are the user of life behind our eyes. We are the life in front of our eyes. This user of life, inevitably the individual, after going through various experiences of how their mind moves, they're going to just realize. They're going to realize that something is being in an unknown way, and that's how the knowledge can move. So every person right now that is existing, that is manifesting the space-time continuum, it's as if there is some level of trust in the moment you have. It's as if you're it's like we're like, oh, look at this, human being that's born that doesn't know anything, but on the other side, it's as if as a moment of being, your knowing is positioned in a different way than how the human knowing is positioned. So it's kind of like, what do you know as the matter in the space, and how do you know as the space that's present in the matter? That's present in a way where the matter's in it. So when it comes to the mind, we're wondering about what is in our mind. When it comes to our body, we're wondering about what our body is in. Okay? So it's another way of saying that behind our eyes, we are a watcher of reality. In front of our eyes, it's hilarious. It's like in front of our eyes, we're inside the imagination of something that is of a different mind, and behind our eyes, we're inside the world of our own imagination. And it's as if a person being like, why nature? Why cosmos? Was it necessary to create a being that internally has different access to reality than externally? Why? Why has nature, why did an evolutionary biological animal evolve so that it could be a subject to itself, and that subject could behave unnaturally in accordance to the natural, so the creature could have a concept of suffering? It's as if wondering, why did we evolve so much as being so long? Why did we evolve so long just to be able to notice our suffering? What is the hidden reasoning behind evolution's effort to become conscious of pain and pleasure? And I think the answer is that conscious pain and pleasure is superior to unconscious numbness, to an unconscious limbo. It's all about what we choose to be in the domain of our consciousness and our conscious attention. I experienced a moment, I think this was last week, where I was really tired and I just collapsed on my bed and I was just laying there, but I had to do something. I had to do something important before, and I was there just lying in the bed and I'm like, oh man, I should just sleep. But then my mind was like, okay, there's still stuff I gotta do. And then my mind, it was as if I had to think of reasons. It was as if I had to think of reasons, more reasons of why I should get out of bed than I should stay in it. Like the mind had to look for the reasons, right? And it's kind of like if you look at life in a way where you're like, okay, I'm this creature that's alive, let's say once in this lifetime, like let's say for a time span of like 100 years, and then as this being that's alive here for 100 years, what can I do in these 100 years, right? And the idea, and then the next thing is like the person's like, okay, do I let the world in front of my eyes define me, or do I let the world behind my eyes define me? Right? Human beings will get to this state, this decision, and it's so important to realize that a person doesn't have to choose between them when they realize they are present in both. It's like somebody being like, yo man, which state of mind do you enjoy more? The conscious waking state, the deep sleep state, or the dream state? These three states that human intelligence cycles through. And imagine somebody's like, yo man, I don't know, in deep sleep state, I don't exist, nothing exists, it seems like it's super peaceful. But even the idea of peace doesn't exist in deep sleep. But in dream states, the person's like, in my dream states, I can fly and move and do things I can't in reality, you know? What I'm trying to say is that rather than us trying to find a line of code or a secret truth or a technique, it's just about realizing the value that is given to your own moment of mind. So for me, I would say I was a person that the more I thought I knew, the less I was open to noticing new things. You know, the more I acted like a king of knowledge, the less I could say. But the more I became a fool of an unknown world, there was so much more to see, so many ways to see. You know, there's been times where I've remembered of how I've lived years ago, and it's as if my mind has moved different. You know what it is? It's like you live through a moment, the moment happens and becomes a memory, but years later you relive that moment in your inner realms and discover other ways you could have lived that moment. And without trust, what can we do? You know, without trust, we'll never finish anything. Somebody's going to be like, Mr. Within, of course you have to say trust, you know, when you're giving 10,000 times. I guess what I'm saying, I'm sometimes when I give these talks, I try to envision like how the viewers are hearing it. Or if I was standing in front of myself, how would I hear it? What I'm trying to say, for those human beings that are interested in wondering about what other ways intelligence can move, due to us being conscious and our consciousness noticing unconscious involuntary movement and then conscious voluntary movement, it's all about a relationship with what we don't know. I'm just this person who found himself in a moment where myself didn't mean anything and the world didn't mean anything, and I felt like I was just the preference, I was the presence of preferencelessness, I was embodying the spirit of nothing, like and then the spirit in nothing has always to move. What I'm trying to tell people is that we are trying to structurally and in an instructional sequence-based format have a relationship with the transcendental possibility of our world, right? Transcendental potential of reality. But what I have realized, it is kind of like they say when a human being uses its brain, like they've measured it, it's like 12% and dolphins use 20%. What I'm trying to tell the viewers is that the greater percentages of your mind and brain is not consciously activated. So when a person can trust the unconscious, then technically there's no difference between their conscious and unconscious. So it's another way of saying a person trusts their known life, which is right now. Like for example, me, I'm trusting my known life. But for me to trust my unknown life means what else is moving in my space of mind aside from what I am moving in that space. Automated speech is another way of saying a person is not actually talking. A person is seeing. A person notices something moving, and then it's just like a person gets on a surfboard and holds their balance on it. Similarly, you notice the inner vision, you notice the inner rhythm. There's an instantaneous emotion of trust, and then the voice box, like right now my voice is automated. Like I'm not moving my voice, it's moving. And it's not moving, or let me say it this way, my voice is moving, kind of like, imagine you're someone you've written so much that you don't have to think about how you're holding the pen in your hand. That's what I'm trying to say. When I give these talks, it's like I'm not thinking about how I'm holding the pen in my hand, how my voice sounds or how the words come. It's just noticing the inner event, noticing that there's a value. Ultimately, intelligence has defined variables for itself and is interacting, right? Like what is the nature of interaction, of the interaction of intelligence, right? It's as if, why did people look at a body and be like there was a soul in there? Why is the concept of animation connected to the idea that a soul moves? So really it's observing movement and observing the types of movement and realizing that when you are experiencing something beyond the dimensions of your knowledge, you have to trust. Without trust in the presence of your own being, one's own being, the greater dimensions of one's own being cannot be accessed by consciousness. It's really how we're defining ourselves that suggests our freedom. If I think I'm a weak person right now, I'll be like, man, I'm too shy, I'm too shy to talk, like the weakness will give my mind an ability to find a world where the excuse is valid, right? But if I consider myself, no, I'm an evolutionary being, The human species has an innate greatness of just being here. You know, it's kind of like a body it's like the body knew it was going to enter a world where it would have to interact with, and the mind's assistance to the body is a quicker speed of structure. So the only way our ancestors have survived natural selection is because they were able to act before the moment could. They lived faster in our minds. So if we were to look at all of our ancestors, I mean, of course there is karma, circumstance, nature's randomity and all of this, but I'm saying like something that we know that got our ancestors through was that their minds adjusted to reality before their bodies had to, so then their bodies knew how to adjust, compared to all those other creatures that didn't know how to adjust. It's kind of like if you, to live in the future, you're required to see it. The future is one of the most beautiful and poetic ideas ever. The future is not only where everybody is going to a self in time. The future is where infinite possibilities await. Just like a person can fathom, okay, there's infinite ways technically that any individual can behave, but it depends what ways are accessible to their consciousness, right? Why do people educate themselves? Because what education is reality acquaintance. How many types? It's like when you look at a moment, how many dimensions do you see active? In how many contexts is a concept being held? Education is those who have the most context to a specific context, they become experts in it. But when it comes to mysticism, it's like the person's like, wait a minute, I'm being a self in a world, but in what world? And the levels of that world is being considered. A part of me really wonders, what will happen to our beloved humanity? What will happen to the simple, natural human organism? A part of me feels that chaos and order will still play their games, but human consciousness will slowly shift to a different abode. Our minds or poetically, how our bodies are experienced in our mind is another way of saying how Earth is in the heavens. And so the mind is like the heaven and the body is like the earth. And when the mind wants to live in an advanced way on earth, it's poetically building paradise on earth. And when I say paradise, I'm talking about it more as an inner, internal experience rather than an external existence. For example, Abrahamic traditions, paradise is a location. The dude's like, where am I gonna go? It's like, what GPS address should my soul kind of put into the moment? And the person's like, all right, Afterlife, I'm going to go to an afterlife. I'm going to go to a different location. Even the Pharaoh in Egypt wanted to take his ship and all his belongings to the afterlife, which was the underworld for him, right, for the Pharaoh. So human beings have an external sense of a location, right, as if the afterlife is another dimension where there's a constitution to reality. But internally speaking, when you realize existence is being experienced simultaneously as experience is existing, then the person's like, okay, what's the value of the free will? What's the point of being conscious in a giant unconscious unknown? And the point is for this consciousness to reestablish and reacquaint itself with the unknown. You know, if a yogi was asked, are somebody reincarnated as a gazelle and somebody reincarnated as a human being, and it's as if like, what's the life purpose of these two souls that have reincarnated in these two ways? And it's as if the one who's reincarnated as a gazelle, the lesser species other than the human, they're just here to become acquainted with the known reality. That means the instincts feel familiar in their ecosystem, and then the animal experiences a moment where something unknown takes away its known experience. To be a human being is to comprehend the unknown. That means to be born as a human being is to be born as a being that has the capability of noticing unknown ways where its own knowledge is present. Human life is actually here to become conscious of the unknown, not to use knowledge to forget the unknown. The unknown is the most important thing to study because everybody is headed there. You know, all our smiles and frowns, they're all headed for the unknown. And we are literally a species that is retaliating to the void through knowledge in a way where the unknown is relevant in every dimension. The person's like, what's going to happen to me in the future? What's going to happen to my species in the future? What's going to happen to the world in the future? What's going to happen to the cosmos in the future? Do you see what I'm saying? We are literally, knowledge is there to assist us in interacting and engaging and having a relationship with the unknown. And trust is the epitome, dear viewers. That means, can you imagine a being that trusted all its known dimensions and unknown dimensions, and for the first time the Creator's perfection was remembered? You see, that's the power, I think. And I think this is the true allure of religious thought and monotheistic religious thought, that the person is in some sense finding their belief, giving them an access to a reality where they are trusting the whole system, right? Some people, I don't know where it was, I think it was this forum or somewhere online where I was reading, somebody said that to be alive as a human being is to be like the world is a reality machine. And I was thinking, what a term, reality machine, right? And really what it means is that you create your reality and then the world brings it to life. That's the idea of the world being a reality machine. So it doesn't matter if you think there is one God, if that means in the middle of nowhere, if you think that there is a God that is controlling everything, the mind is working in accordance to that context of information. And the allure in religion is that the person individually feels like, is it my responsibility to move everything in my world of consciousness? Or is there someone else? Or is there something else? When a person comes into the unknown, the most what's the term I want to use? The most amplified humanization of the unknown is the concept of God. God is another way of saying that we are giving authority to the inconceivable over conception. To be a human being is to realize that you are also being the life of your world. You know, there was a time where poetically and just it was a mystery for me where I was like, you know, there's a poetry to the concept of God and the concept of the soul. How from the religious narrative, God imbued man with its breath. So it's another way of saying God put itself into man as a soul. And the soul, hilariously, has the ability of God, but behind its eyes. You know what I'm saying? That means behind our eyes, a novelist can grab a pen and just envision a world, create a world. Our minds can create worlds, and they can also forget them. Or they can find worlds and forget them. But the idea is that something in us has an ability to recontain meaning as a different narrative. It depends, transcendentalism depends on how much you require it. And really, how is the world speaking to you as your experience? That's what karma is. Karma is how the cosmos is talking to you. And meditation is how you listen to the cosmos speaking. Oh dear humanity, is the power that moves you universal? Is there a freedom beyond conceptual meaning? And why is there an unknown factor to anyone, to everyone? You know, sometimes a person, you know, I guess it can be said that knowledge is the simulation in the unknown. Knowledge is the simulation. How we know we're being anything at all is a containment in empty space. The question comes, really, how should 8 billion creatures conduct themselves? We have given the idea of freedom to humanity, but what does freedom mean? Does the species seek physical freedom? Like outer, physical, external freedom? Does the species seek non-physical internal freedom? Or does the world seek freedom from itself? Like imagine a person, you know, getting tired of being who they are, and then imagine a world getting tired of what it is. It's like the attention, you know, hilariously, like an angry king wondering where its kingdom is, you know. Our minds look for truth as if they are in the wrong world. There's this saying, it's in ancient times, they would say the mind is a lousy master but a great servant. And there was also this quote I remember reading where it says, you must serve before you command. Think of in the intelligence of the human being in some sense an intelligent person being a person who can command their mind. Now, if you have to serve your mind before you can command it, it's another way of saying that the person has to find in the lifetime moments where they can trust the unknown rhythm, how the moment is going forth. If you can trust how the moment is moving, then the person can trust the content they find in that movement. It's like our biological physical life is the cocoon and our mind is the caterpillar. And something throughout the whole lifetime as the human being lives, it's like the butterfly is getting ready to step out of the outer realms. It's so poetic, we're kind of born, it's like birth is an entrance, death is an exit, and it's kind of like we enter to exit. We are by the nature of being temporary, we cannot ignore like why we were here at all, right? The person's like, wait a minute, Cosmos, you gave me existence only for 100 years, why? The most advanced state of intelligence is not conceptual, it's not ideological, it's not analytical. The future generations will look at us in 2022 trying to analyze reality, and they're going to be like, look at our ancestors, just like how people drive automatic cars right now. Before they used to drive manual stick shift cars. In the far future, the future generations are going to imagine children in the year 2222. You're going to look back at people who are alive in 2022 and be like, no way, these guys used manual intellect. Their intellect was still manual, it wasn't automated. The more you trust the world, the more you can know it. Without trust, the world doesn't open itself. Hilariously, it's like people. When people don't trust each other, what tends to happen is they lock down, they hide their original being. And when we don't trust the planet, or when we don't trust the world, or when we don't trust our moment, it's like the world doesn't show us its original nature. To serve the mind means to listen to the mind. To listen to something means to trust it. Long story short, guys, pretty much the summary of this episode. Trust the unknown and your mind can move in new ways. Automated speech, automated anything, even dancing, all of this, it's a trust. It's a trust and it's an expression. It's a sort of release. Something is being released from an inner life into the outer life, and if the inner life has a complete trust in how it is observing it in an unknown way, the known moment, novelty means a new moment means a new view means a new self is there. True spirituality is not concerned with objects and subjects. The hidden life of humanity is the unconscious presence of our minds. Right now, if I was to kind of say, if I wanted to make an argument for how we're living parallel lives, right now I'm living a parallel life in physical biological system. I'm living a parallel life as in an psychological ideological system. I'm living a parallel life in language. That means people just hearing my words only renders a unique life compared to who I am being right now. So there's my life in language, there's my life in the biological body, there's my life in my inner realms as a witness. It's as if there's an inner life, there's an outer biological life, there's a linguistic inner life. It's like in language I live in, if I was to consider as a mind how many lives I'm living a life in language, and I'm living life as space and awareness, and also image. So behind my eyes I'm an image. I could be language, and I could also just be a geometrical shape. There's moments when I get really tired where everything just has a geometrical value for me. It's not a good habit, to be honest. But there's times where, like, I'm in a room and there's others and they have like somebody's going through an emotion, and people look at me as if like, hey man, don't you have empathy? Like, don't you empathize? And I'm like, I'm just looking at the moment so geometrically that emotions are irrelevant. So there are states of mind where a person can just be attention to shape. But there is a biological life, there's a linguistic life, there's a cyber life. Right now, I would say I'm alive at a pioneering point of the cyber life. But there is, in the future, just like how we wake up in the morning to our conscious physical waking state, there's going to be a time in the future they're going to wake up in cyberspace. Dreams are going to just be cyber lives, who knows? What if in the future the person goes to bed, sleeps, but instead of their dream being some random automated picture that just is randomly selected, imagine a person can live in cyberspace. So imagine somebody imagine far in the future, right? You're walking, let's say late at night, down the street, and let's say in an advanced civilization there would be complete safety and trust. But anyways, let me say it this way. It would be as if like you're at home sleeping in your bed, but and a wisp, a hologram version of you is walking in the street outside, and your psychology is connected to a cyberspace live stream of Earth. What I'm trying to say is, in the future, they're going to be awake in their dreams. People can even do work in their sleep. Right now, the mysteries of consciousness remain for our species. And a person may wonder, okay, let's say I attain automated speech, what happens after? Let's say the person, whether in anything they do, they can suddenly catch a rhythm, right? Just like somebody going into a nightclub, hearing the music and being able to dance along with the music. Similarly in life, in any craft, in anything we do, if we find a rhythm, we can do it. We can do anything as long as we find, just like the dance music in the club, we find the rhythm to the moment. So I guess kind of somebody giving a talk is like it's like an unknown attention surfing the content of its mind. The surfboard is attention to form. You know, maybe a good exercise would be, anybody listening to this, just close your eyes right now and wonder about the unknown variables and the known variables. If you remember something, if you visualize something, there's an image, so that becomes a known variable. When I close my eyes and I wonder, okay, what am I seeing? I am actually noticing how I am seeing in a sort of, it's like there's awareness prior to sight. It's like imagination is the behavior of our mind in another dimension, in another room. Anybody interested in this topic? I remember I gave a talk called The Global Antenna Renaissance. And honestly, I don't know what else to say, really. I just find a moment where I can just be in the simplest way I know. And when I am simply present in the moment, I notice complex movements. The complex movements, if they lead to a vision, activate a rhythm, and then I trust the rhythm, and everything happens afterwards on its own. It's like we're an individual physical particle in an invisible field. It's like the mind is in the body. Excuse me, it's like the body is in the mind, and the mind is in an unknown place. So in order to be able to move the mind like we move the body, we need to have an observational, so whoever you are listening to me, similar to how you're being a mind right now that knows there's a body in the moment. If you can, just like how your mind knows your body, if your unknown presence within knows the content of your mind, that means It's like I'm saying anybody who can see their mind can experience its involuntary movement. But anybody who can't see their mind, and when I say see their mind, see the content of their mind. Like right now as I'm speaking, I'm hearing my own voice, but I'm also noticing how every word is creating an image. Or before the word arises, the image is there in the universe. Because what trust can do internally is to show us a different moment, a different way the self happens. It's like we are a spiral of piano keys where every note, is like a different self and a different mode. And I think about it, why, if consciousness could be involuntary, if everything could be automated, why did the free will arise? And it's kind of like nature couldn't do something. And so it created a way. Think of nature having a problem-solving attitude. And imagine the planet trying to solve a problem that the only solution was for the human being to exist in. The emergence of the human being was the solution to a problem of the planet. So this might sound hilarious, but imagine like the planet imagine the planet like a planetary being, the Gaian mind, or Gaia, the idea of the planet being alive. Imagine the planet wanted an out-of-body experience, an out-of-planet experience, planetary body experience. And so it's as if it designed a human being that could design a spacecraft that could go outside of the Earth's orbit, and then a human being looking at the Earth is like the Earth looking at itself. We are here to use our consciousness. Our DNA is an instrument. We are like master musicians, where our lifetime is pretty much, what we do, what music we create. The more we notice the unknown, the more poetic life becomes. The more we notice the unknown, our certainties and the measurements that lead to our certainties are not enough. Because really to think about the purpose of life is, what is the purpose of function? Why is anything moving at all? Is the purpose of consciousness for it to create a vision and then follow it? Are we like these biological machines, that project a version of themselves in the future, and the whole time the machine has to just try to build towards that? Could there be a secret meaning behind the human being? And what is consciousness waiting for? To be a mind in a world is like a lion that knows it can roar but hasn't. I think the purpose of existence is to perform. And the purpose of experience is to be the audience of your own performance. That means consciousness is given, so some intelligent rhythm doesn't forget it was alive. We are conscious. because the world loves itself. Because the cosmos believed it deserves to be seen. This is really the archetype of beauty. You see, there's a beauty in the outer realms, which is, let's say, symmetrical beauty, geometrical beauty. But then there's a beauty of why the life force is even moving in the moment. You know, there are sacred moments in life. Sacred, that means moments that are just supreme, where the person's like, man, the ego is tired of constantly jumping through hoops of conditioned reality. And the person just watches from the corner of the universe, from the corner of their universe. Just like a quiet, silent person just watches the world. And there is something strange about karma, that when we don't want the world wants us. It's hilarious. It's kind of like when we don't want anything, then nature has an ability to move as an impression in our mind. It's like somebody trying to find God, being like somebody chasing a butterfly. You can't. It's like you're a step behind. Or somebody trying to find truth. But if you just sit still and silent, and for a moment wonder if the whole mind and its content and the body and everything that's informational in the moment that has form and shape, what if it was just pressed? What if your awareness pressed pause on the video game of life? What would you notice there? The awareness that the space between our thoughts is the proof that there is an unknown viewer here. Humanity is reaching a phase where it has to interact and engage with the unknown. And that means we've reached a point where it doesn't make sense anymore to fear the world. It's like, what do we do when we can see something be better, but it's not being better? What can we do? What can 8 billion creatures do when the motivation for their outer life is based on an inner insight, an inner realization? I want to read some quotes from a man named Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. Or actually, I'm going to read a quote from quotes from this saint called Ananda Mahima. Anandamai Ma says, always bear this in mind. Everything is in God's hand, and you are his tool to be used by him as he pleases. Try to grasp the significance of, in quotations, all is his, and you will immediately feel free from all burdens. What will be the result of your surrender to him? None will seem alien, and all will be your very own self. That means it's kind of like when we trust the unknown, we are trusting where the knowledge is in. Shri Anandamai Ma says reality is beyond speech and thought. Only that which can be expressed in words is being said, but what cannot be put into language is indeed that with a capital T, which is with a capital I. So it's another way of saying we are being this truth that we use language to point to, but it's beyond the speech and thought. Shri Anandamai Ma says divine happiness. Even the tiniest particle of a grain of it never leaves one again, and when one attains to the essence of things and finds one's self, this is supreme happiness. When it is found, nothing else remains to be found. The sense of want will not awaken anymore, and the heart's torment will be stilled forever. Do not be satisfied with fragmentary happiness. Tell me about it. Do not be satisfied with fragmentary happiness, which is invariably interrupted by shocks and blows of fate, but become complete, and having attained to perfection, be yourself. That means the idea is not to just get enlightened from the self, it's to also be your enlightened self. What's the point of discovering an advanced state of being if you can't be it? You know? That means we're not here just to be advanced, just to realize we can be advanced. We're here to be the advancement. Shri Anandamai Ma says, who is it that loves and who that suffers? He alone stages a play with himself. Who exists save him? The individual suffers because he perceives duality. The individual suffers because he perceives duality. It is duality which causes all sorrow and grief. Find the one everywhere and in everything, and there will be an end to pain and suffering. It's as if Shri Anandamai Ma is saying there's a truth beyond objects and subjects, and reality is the will and intent of this inconceivable force, and it's kind of like what we think is a human being's karma of self is like the universe's game. It's kind of like there's a moment where all moments are being extended from, and anybody who goes back to that original moment, suffering stops because that moment is within every moment. Shri Anandamai Ma says, how many lives are frittered away, age after age, and endless coming and going. Find out who you are. Shriyananda says, when by the flood of your tears the inner and the outer have fused into one, you will find her whom you sought with such anguish, nearer than the nearest, the very breath of life, the very core of every heart. Exactly. Yeah, after we get the species to discriminate between its inner and outer, between the within and without, then it has to realize they're in the unknown observers, and we're shifting from a human personality to the rhythms, to the experiential rhythms of the presence of humanity. That means what Shriyananda Maima is saying here is that imagine you find a truth behind your eyes, a truth of your mind, a truth to your mind, a truth behind your eyes, and you realize a truth in front of your eyes, and it's the same truth. It's another way of saying the body is singular, is existential. Or I should say this way, it's like the body is a dimension, the mind is a bunch of dimensions, but what is aware of all these dimensions and allowing them to instantaneously be empowered is one. So it's another way of saying, if the idea of a dimension is a concept, it's like your inner dimensions, your outer dimensions, or all the ways your attention has fragmented and opened up like the petals of a lotus to the world. It's like you realize it's one lotus. You realize that this whole time, being is being. That's it. Technically, technically there might be some interdimensional beings looking at me giving these talks and be like, yo, this guy is spending all this time sharing something behind his eyes to in front of his eyes, but everybody is standing behind their eyes. It's like, what does a transcendental being do in a world? Evidently give a podcast, Let me finish this quote tunnel and I'll end off the talk. Shriyananda Maima says, when the mind is full of worldly desires, it is their very nature to confuse the mind, withdraw the mind from outer things and turn it inwards. And here's the thing. Imagine you do this. Imagine you're someone who you somehow turn your mind away from outer things inwards. What you're going to access, like what I feel that the fruit of the inner life is, it's like a being that is seeking enlightenment is not enlightened, because if we were to think that what would an enlightened being have the concept of enlightenment, and the answer is no. Like a human being that is being a human being doesn't need to have a concept that I need to be a human being, right? Because we're being it. Similarly, when we realize a freedom of our nature, it's as if the cosmos has, by individualizing us, has given us an ability to return collectively in many ways, right? Infinity is, rather than a relationship of a collective with the individual, infinity is the relationship of the individual with the collective. Like the whole point of being a micro in the macro, a microcosmic entity in a macrocosmic world, is so this small little thing we are, has access to infinite relationships with the big thing that it actually is in the moment. So to be a human being is to be conscious as a human being, is to be like this intelligence in the world that wants to use infinity. A blessing of individualism is the idea of infinity. But a collective being doesn't have finite, infinite relationships with itself. It's like, does the ocean fear evaporation? It's like, not really. Anyways, one more quote, and there's two more quotes I'll read too. Shiran the Maima says, "Stop coughing." No, she doesn't say that. Shirananda Maima says, "Widen your shriveled heart. Make the interests of others your own and serve them as much as you can by sympathy, kindness, presence, and so forth. So long as one enjoys the things of this world and has needs and wants, it is necessary to minister to the needs of one's fellow men. Otherwise, one cannot be called a human being. Whenever you have the opportunity, give to the poor, feed the hungry, nurse the sick, do service as a religious duty, and you will come to know by direct perception that the person served and the one who serves and the act of service are separate only in appearance." So it's kind of like a worldly being is realizing its activities as an individual in that world is actually a value for the whole world. So it's as if when a person is kind to someone else, you're being kind to the cosmos. When somebody speaks politely, they're not just being polite to someone else, they're being polite to the cosmos. Because if we don't love a part of a system, we become incapable of loving the whole system. And what if loving the world is a way to activate intelligence? If current intelligence is kept active by fear, if we fear the unknown, and that has led to a sort of limited ability, could our love of the unknown lead to a limitless ability? 8 billion lions in the void, and the advanced civilization is their roar. Can you imagine 8 billion lions roaring at the same time? Imagine you're someone, imagine you're like this simple farmer, you get up, it's morning, and you open the door of your farm, you go outside in the field to look at the sun shining on your crops, and you see like 8 billion lions, and they all roar at you at the same time. At that point, the farmer's gonna be like, maybe I'll stay inside today, More and more I'm learning as a being that when I trust the moment, I get to experience it's mine. That's the value of trust. We're living at a time where people think being dishonest is a better strategy than being honest. Not realizing we have one lifetime to get to see who we honestly were. An advanced civilization will capitalize on the potential of individuals, not limit them. Sometimes when I look at, let's say, powerful people like dictators of countries, I feel like, wow, imagine being so powerful. Imagine being, let's say, the most powerful, richest person on the planet and not being capable enough to realize what's the purpose of power. A lot of people think the purpose of power is to use it to control lesser dimensions. Seldom is this realized that if you are a being that has power, You have already experienced your power individually. Its collective service remains. It's like a human being solving a problem, and then imagine that human being, is compensated in millions. Now imagine the person's like, I don't want to solve just a problem that was relevant to my individual life. What is a collective problem to solve? Right now, the world is kind of waiting. It's waiting for champions. That's really the time we're living in right now. Civilization is waiting for its champions. Human beings who they solve the problems of the individual life and then run to the problems of the collective life. It's like after you've taken care of yourself, you run to take care of your species. After the species can take care of itself, then you run towards the universal sector. You see, there's a spectrum of potential intelligent relationships that the human being can have as it goes into the future. Right now in these Mr.Within talks, I'm trying to point to the audience and the human species that are right. We have strategized to some degree to build a civilization in the outer realms. But now we need to get the species acquainted with the uncharted territories behind its eyes. We don't need advanced technology. We need advanced users of technology. We don't need, it's kind of like we need advanced awareness to how the moment can be on a massive scale. My strategy personally is to just get the species to discriminate between the inner realms and outer realms. Because that discrimination is going to lead to sanity. Because what is war? We know, everybody on the planet knows if war gets out of control, it's a danger of extinction. But what is war? War is when one mind's world is trying to be the world of another. I think all wars can be stopped if humanity envisions far enough. Imagine we woke up and we saw the United Nations has gone to the leaders of all nations and has said to all leaders of all nations, you have to come up with 1,000-year, okay, that's too much, but let's say you have to come up with like a 400-year plan of what your nation's gonna do, right? And all the nations have to agree that in 400 years we're not gonna be as savage as we are now, right? Like, what's the point of evolving? Sometimes when I look at violence, like violent people, I think about what's the point of being in civilization, right? Why is the violent person hurting other human beings instead of going and living like Tarzan in the jungle? Isn't that a good question? Why is violence occurring on a human level? Why isn't the violent person just being exiled to a jungle where they it's like, if like that's like an intense punishment. For me, I noticed it like this, that the purpose of civilization is to realize that we can behave in accordance to an internal expectation on reality. Just like a nation has laws and the people follow those laws, a person's personality, there's laws and context. It's like there's laws to self. Every person is living in accordance to subconscious rules for reality. Once you discover your true nature, you realize you are the awareness to condition. You are not in a condition. That means the game of good and evil go away, and the person's like, how else can the attention move before there's any emphasis of a story connected to it? You see, I'm trying to get this species to become explorers of an unknown world when we have misguidedly believed in a limited one. To advance civilization is natural. Like, eventually civilization will advance and there will be more and more people in history. I could be just the early word, but I feel like inevitably, like, civilization will reach a point. Imagine civilization is being inefficient right now. So for how long? For how long are people going to tolerate inefficiency? After some point, we're going to be true to the actual level of intelligence that the human being has, the capability. That means we have to, as a species, look at what the most advanced individual on the planet, whoever that may be, in this 8 billion of us here, right? And we have to see if a human being's mind has fathomed a potential better than now. It's another way of saying the possibility exists. We are like 8 billion ideas of a planet in human form. We are 8 billion versions of the planet. There's 8 billion inner realms. Isn't that incredible? We're in one physical reality, but everybody's seeing that physical reality in their own subjective way. One objective reality, everybody has their own subjective axis, therefore rendering 8 billion subjective realities. So we climb out of our inner life and we notice the unknown world, and with the strength of all that has endured as life force so far, we live our lives. You see, it's shifting from behaving like a robotic, ideological entity to trusting that we are a force. It's like they say, life force. It's a force. We are literally an energetic force in the realm, right? And the way we're using this energy that we are is through our ego. And Alan Watts has a good way of explaining the ego. Pretty much the idea you have of yourself, it's like what's in your conscious attention in the moment. That becomes your ego. Shiryananda Maima says, for one who knows me, I am with him. For one who wants to know me, I am very near to him. And for one who does not know me, I am a beggar before him. Shiryananda Maima says, inquire, who am I, and you will find the answer. Look at a tree. From one seed arises a huge tree. From it comes numerous seeds, each one of which in its turn grows into a tree. No two fruits are alike, yet it is one life that throbs in every particle of the tree. So it is the same Atman everywhere. Yeah, I mean, we could totally look at this cosmos and we're being like, yo, we are like the seed of a universe, right? A universe became a tree, it created seeds, and then those seeds are universes of their own. Like, we don't know, we could be like in the lineage of like endless universes. Like, the person's like, bro, I don't even, remember my past life. I remember my past universe. Can you imagine two spiritual people? One of them's like, I remembered my past life. The other one's like, that's adorable, man. I remembered before the universe was the universe where we had lives in. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. The main intent of this is that we as a species care to wonder about our minds, try to get acquainted and share the feedback. Literally, hunter-gatherers back in the day hunted and gathered and brought it back to the species. Right now, all of this has become internal for the mind. Back in the day it was for a specific tribe. Now every member of the species has to go explore the nature of reality, the nature of their minds, and in the future, hopefully, in an advanced civilization, and this is one of my goals, we create an incredible archive and database, and maybe in the great future, a dictionary for all the different states of mind and attention that there could be. Pretty much we are explorers of an inner world as much as we are explorers in an outer one. And we have one lifetime to not just serve ourselves, but serve our species. Like when else aside from this lifetime can we have an opportunity to activate the collective potential of the greatest life of our creatures in the world? And so really they say, or actually I've said it in some talks where I say, like, to live for life is to actually, it's like when you live for life, you live for life. Let us be honored, fascinated by how incredible the world is and how many incredible things are waiting. Like, who knows? For the smile of truth is the awakening of all things. And what can we do? I mean, what else can consciousness do aside from either distrust or trust the moment? You know, it's like the person's like, am I being in a world right now? Am I existing in a world right now? And then the person's like, okay, I'm existing. You know, I gotta trust the existence. Now the question comes, can we trust how we experience our existence? And if we have instantaneously trusted our existence, then what is stopping us from instantaneously trusting our experience? It's like the person wondering, is there a version of me that doesn't fear any part of me? Whether it's individual, physical life, or collective life. That means to not fear the world. That's it. That means when we don't, if our sense of self is connected to the idea of the world, is codependent to the world, if we have a fear of the self, it's either because we have a fear of the world, right? It's like either there's fear of the world or there's fear of being a self in a world. But if we somehow stop fearing the self first, or we stop fearing the world first, there will come a moment where the intelligence would be like, how have I been able to even fear something that is just a functioning event? Do you know? It's as if, like, how can you doubt a system that is happening? You know, that's what life is really, you know? It's like we're here to trust the world until we realize we're being it. Thanks for listening, guys. Much blessings and namaste. Rise, mankind, rise.